Well, we're about to dive into a story that billions of people think they know, but maybe don't. Not really. This isn't just about reading the Old Testament, it's about the secret history behind it. And trust me, it's a story that is way more complex, more human, and frankly, more miraculous than you might imagine. So let me just ask you, right now, when I say the words Old Testament, what's the first image that pops into your head? Is it some ancient, dusty, letter-bound book? A single sacred volume sitting on a shelf?
For most of us, yeah, that's it exactly. We picture this one big book, written from cover to cover, a fixed masterpiece, just handed down through the ages. But what if I told you, that picture isn't right? That's not how it started at all.
The truth is, the Old Testament isn't a single book. It's a library. A divine library, sure, but one that was forged through very human hands over thousands of years. And once you see it that way, well, it changes everything. Okay, so this whole story, it doesn't begin with a bound book. It begins with individual scrolls. These texts, they emerged piece by piece over a span of almost 1,000 years. And they were written by this tiny nation surrounded by massive empires with their own powerful stories and mythologies. And I mean, just look at the variety on these library shelves. You've got the incredible poetry of the Psalms, you've got the foundational laws in the Torah, these super detailed family histories and chronicles, and then the profound wisdom of a book like Job, which just wrestles with suffering. It's this stunning collection of different styles, all telling one unified story. Now, you have to remember the world these were written in. This wasn't a vacuum. You had epics like Gilgamesh, you had all the Egyptian mythology. The biblical authors, they did something brilliant. They took those ideas and masterfully subverted them to make a radical, countercultural point that there is only one unique God, Yahweh.
So, if it's a library, that brings up a really important question, right? Who decided which books actually get a spot on the shelf? And that leads us to one of the most crucial concepts in the history of the Bible.
The word is canon. It actually comes from a Greek word that means a measuring rod, a standard or a rule. So the canon is the official list of books that a religious community agrees is genuinely inspired and authoritative.
But here is the key. You gotta get this. The canon wasn't decided by some committee in a smoke-filled room one weekend. It was this long, organic process. These scrolls were read, debated in synagogues, studied by rabbis. They were used by the community for centuries. God's people, over generations of prayer and study, came to recognize which texts just had that ring of divine authority.
And this process led to slightly different collections. On one hand, you have the proto-canonical books. That's the 39 books of the Hebrew Bible which all traditions, Protestant, Catholic, and Orthodox accept. But the early Greek translation, the Septuagint, had some extra texts. We call those the deuterocanonical books. Catholic and Orthodox Christians include them in their Bibles, while Protestants consider them historically valuable but not scripture.
Okay, so the collection for our library is set. But now for the next question. How did these incredibly fragile scrolls survive for thousands of years? I'm telling you, this next part of the story is just mind-blowing. I mean, really stop and think about this. There were no printing presses, no cloud storage. You couldn't just hit Save As. Every single copy of every single scroll had to be reproduced by hand, letter by painstaking letter. And we're not talking about a quick project. For more than 1,000 years, Jewish scribes and later Christian monks dedicated their entire lives to this. In dusty rooms, in monasteries, sometimes even in hiding, they copied every line with an almost unimaginable precision. This was never just a job for them. It was a profound act of worship.
It's almost like the prophet Isaiah knew. He wrote, "The word of our God will stand forever." And through the tireless, faithful hands of these scribes, history itself proved that promise to be true.
And how do we know they were so accurate? Well, we have the receipts. Meet the heavy hitters. Ancient manuscripts like the Codex Vaticanus and Codex Sinaiticus from way back in the 4th century. These are absolute treasures, and they show an astonishing consistency across the centuries, proving just how reliably this text was passed down.
But what about the original Hebrew? Well, it had this one huge challenge. See, ancient Hebrew was written with only consonants, no vowels. Imagine trying to read English that way. The quick brown fox would look like THQCKBRNFX. The meaning had to be memorized, which, over time, is a pretty big risk.
So, how do you solve a problem like that? How do you lock in the correct pronunciation, the correct meaning for all future generations when the vowels are literally missing from the page?
Well, enter the heroes of this part of the story, the Masoretes. These Jewish scholars working between the 7th and 10th centuries came up with a genius solution. They invented this intricate system of little dots and dashes called vowel points. They meticulously added these points all around the consonants, which effectively froze the traditional pronunciation in time, forever. They even added notes in the margins counting letters and words to make sure no errors crept in. It's truly one of the most incredible feats of scholarship in all of human history.
So, after all that, why does this matter to us today? Let's just step back for a second and look at the whole incredible picture we've just painted. I mean, think about the journey this text has been on. It starts as oral traditions passed around a campfire. Then you have prophets and scribes writing on scrolls. Then centuries of intense debate over which books belong. Then 1,000 years of copying by hand across continents. Then the genius of the Masoretes preserving the original language. It's an epic.
And this, right here, is the central idea. The Old Testament didn't just fall out of the sky fully formed. It's a divine human masterpiece. It's a collaboration crafted through real history, real conflict, and unbelievable human faithfulness. All of it guided by what believers would call divine providence.
So I guess the question I want to leave you with is this. Now that you know the incredible, sometimes messy, and totally miraculous story behind this ancient library, does it change how you see it? Does it maybe deepen your appreciation for it, and maybe even invite you to explore its shelves in a new way? Because once you understand the story behind the scriptures, I guarantee you'll never read them the same way again.